Oh, hey, it's Emily, and today I'm going to be talking about my bookish goals. I have a very brief window to try and film really quickly here, so I'm gonna roll with it because that's what we have to work with. The lighting's not great. I'm just chilling here on the floor, but we're gonna roll with it. And I wanted to revisit my goals from last year. I'll link that video down below in case you're curious, and see how I did with them, see if I want to maintain these goals this year, and just kind of do a quick review of that. So one of my goals, and my main goal, was to bring down my physical TBR. So this one I feel like I did overall a really good job of. I haven't looked at numbers of the percentage of books I read that were on my physical TBR versus ones that weren't, but I know I did a really good job of this through a couple of things. Just one, making sure that I was reading what was on my physical TBR. And it's not that there weren't ones that I read that weren't on my physical TBR, but I really do feel like I kept them to a pretty good minimum. And I also did some unhauling to get rid of books that I ultimately felt were just going to be in better hands elsewhere. And so I wanted to make sure to do that. And I think through both of those things, I actually did a really good job dwindling down my physical TBR. I now just have a few small shelves in the bookshelf in front of me that are fiction books that I haven't read. I do have a couple more here, as well as another shelf in a different bookshelf over there of some nonfiction books I haven't read yet. The high priority ones being on a very small bookshelf in front of me, and then some of the lower priority ones being on that other bookshelf. But I have managed to kind of get it down to a narrow, small bookshelf in front of me that are ones that I haven't read. So I feel like I've done a really good job with this one. Another thing that I wanted to do was focus on books that I had started but not yet finished. Quite a few of those are nonfiction, and I haven't done a great job of integrating in nonfiction books this year. I have read some nonfiction books, but it hasn't been the percentage that it has been in the past, or that I want it to be in the coming year, and there are many reasons for that. That's not something that I am gonna feel bad about. I had a goal of integrating a bit more nonfiction in, but I also really need to just let myself read what I need to read in the moment. Anyway, so quite a few of the ones that I've started but not finished are nonfiction books. And so those are still on my shelf. I will continue that goal next year, I think. Another goal is to balance fiction and nonfiction better. I think this is one that I didn't succeed at this year because I was also just not mentally in a place to really balance in a bunch of other nonfiction books. I really feel like I will be next year. I'm feeling a lot better about just re-engaging with the world and just really kind of getting back to closer to how my reading has been in years prior to the past couple of years, where I think I did a much better job of balancing nonfiction. I think I'm ready to get to that place, and there will be another video talking about how I plan to do that in terms of restructuring the videos on this channel. So that wasn't a goal that I did well with this year, but I have plans to integrate that better into my goals for next year. Another goal was to focus on reading around the world. This is a challenge that Kim from Expedition Through Pages, I'll link her information down below, and I have, and I still need to wrap up the last Cambodia book. And we intended to do another round this year, like another complete round, and that hasn't happened. We have drawn countries that we'll focus on next, and so that is something that I plan on continuing next year. And I'm going to be working on a video soon to talk about which country I picked. It's on my Instagram, which I will have linked down below, and what books that means I will be focusing on. And our current plan is to each focus on the country that we drew, and pick a list that we want to read for that country, and kind of have at least one book of overlap that we read from the other person's country to at least have had one book in common from each country list, but we'll see how that goes. But that's definitely an area that I will continue to focus on, and did focus on some because we did almost get through at least Cambodia, and we've got plans for how we want to keep doing that in the future. Another one was wrap up some series. This is another one that had to go on the back burner and was a goal that was in conflict with my first and primary goal of getting through my physical TBR, because I don't actually have a lot of second books in series or continuations of a series in physical form. So it might be a series like a Fairy Loot series, for example, where I got the first book and maybe don't have a physical copy of the second one, but I am interested in continuing the series, or just some other random series where I have the first, maybe the second on my shelf, but continuing this series was going to be in conflict with reading what I actually have on my physical TBR, because I just don't have that many continuations of series on my physical TBR. So I have finished some series this year, but it has not been a focus of mine this year, because I decided that that was not going to be a primary goal, and that if I didn't meet that one, that was going to be one that I was very okay with not focusing on, because my first and primary one was just to get through some of my physical books. So those are my goals for last year. And I also, as far as just general channel things, wanted to make sure that I was focusing on readathons, participating more in the community, posting a bit more consistently. I'm not sure how well those went. I did, however, also have a goal of integrating a TBR game into what I did, which I did do successfully, and have those games as my TBRs for most of the TBRs that I posted this year. Not all of them, but almost all of them, and had a really fun time with that game. I'm going to be deciding how I want to integrate that into how I plan on restructuring some things next year. So stay tuned for that video, or if I post that one first, then it's the previous video on my channel. I'm gonna be filming a couple in one day. It'll just depend on what order I edit and upload them. But that video will also be coming soon, or was recently posted. And I really feel like I'm gonna have very similar goals for next year. I will be able to focus a bit less on bringing down my physical TBR, because I am substantially closer to doing that. And one of the things that I'm thinking about doing is ending my subscription for the YA Fairy Loot box, and instead just focusing on the adult one, so that that's at least one less book a month I'm bringing in. I'm considering this, and I was thinking about doing it in the new year, ending that subscription, but I'm also very intrigued by the book that they are going to be putting in their January box. So it just becomes a constant battle of, well, but I'm interested in the books, and I generally have a very fun time reading them, and overall it's a huge success rate for me as far as whether or not I actually end up enjoying them. I enjoy the vast majority of the young adult Fairy Loot books, but one thing I also need to consider is how many of those have actually made it to my list of favorites of the year. And that number is pretty low, even if I enjoy a substantial portion of them. How many of them have made a lasting impact on me? Something to consider, and something that I'll be thinking more about. But I've enjoyed so many, and I wanted to continue on, and have continued on with quite a few of those series. And so it's hard. It's something I'm thinking about, though, to be able to stay more on top of my physical TBR, because at the moment I've got a young adult book coming in, an adult Fairy Loot subscription book coming in, as well as Book of the Month, which I've been keeping up with, but that is part of why it can be a struggle to keep on top of my physical TBR, because I've decided to put way too many subscription books in there. And so anyway, but I'm going to be focusing, or continuing to focus on, bringing down the last bit of my physical TBR, especially for fiction, and kind of bringing that down so that I can structure things in a way that I'll be talking about in that separate video. And focusing on books that I have started but not yet finished will be something that I continue in terms of getting and integrating more nonfiction into my reading next year, which also means I'll be incorporating that third goal again of balancing fiction and nonfiction better. And I definitely feel like I'm in a place to do that, ready to do that. And I will continuing to be doing reading around the world, so that'll be a challenge that I continue to focus on. And I think the way that I'm going to be changing the structure of it is going to be something that will also allow me to do that, and I'll explain that in that video. I did integrate it into my TBR game this year, which was one of the main ways I was actually able to get the Cambodia books on my TBR. And Kim kind of had a similar situation too, where she was integrating some of her goals into her TBR game, which is super fun, by the way. So be sure to check that out. Super fun TBR game. But it still meant that we had to kind of structure it in a very different way than I plan on doing next year. So I hope that I'll be able to focus on the reading around the world books pretty well. And I also hope that that means I'll be able to focus on series more, since I will be able to kind of focus less on bringing down my physical TBR, since that is in a much more manageable, smaller place right now, which is where I would like it. I know some people thrive with a big TBR, and more power to you. But I'm really wanting to kind of dwindle down to a very small physical TBR. And so I really do feel like these challenges and these goals that I have carried over from last year, some of which I was more successful at than others, I really feel like carried over quite a few of them is still something I want to do. And the way I'll be structuring things, I think I'll be able to make them, and just where I am with my reading headspace right now and where I want to go, I feel like I'll be able to at least accomplish a good chunk of these, or at least kind of have those as areas of focus. And I also am hoping that it will allow me to participate in readathons and be able to kind of integrate those books into what I read a bit more easily, but we'll see. I really would love to continue to engage more in the community, both by, I would love to be able to make reading sprints and just kind of actually hanging out with some of the people, the really cool people that I've met. I really would love to make that a more consistent part of what I do next year. Of course, it's hard because everything just gets so busy, and coordinating schedules when everyone is so busy is just hard. And there are a lot of other non-bookish things that I would love to do next year. I have so much planned and so much I would love to do that it just becomes hard, but it is still something I would love to do. And I'm hoping that the way I structure it will also allow me to be able to post hopefully more consistently. But again, that's going to depend on just how life things go, and that's okay. One focus I won't have is having a monthly TBR game. Again, it's not that I don't plan on doing some kind of fun things that will kind of randomly pick some things that I'm reading next year. I plan to integrate a lot of that, just in a different way that isn't necessarily a monthly TBR game. So stay tuned for that video of kind of how I plan on integrating some of those in, and we'll see how it goes. These aren't goals that I am gonna feel like a failure if I don't accomplish them. These are things that I like to look at just to kind of see, just to kind of have a little bit of direction for myself, but these aren't something that I will take super personally if I can't quite focus on some of these, or feel like I'm not doing something I'm supposed to, or feel pressure on myself to accomplish some of these. I already do what I can, and even if it's not very much, we're all just doing this in whatever little spare time we can, and that's okay. And so I like setting goals for myself because I am a very goal-oriented person. It really helps me stay focused and stay driven. And as I said, I've already set a bunch of goals for myself for next year, external to bookish things or reading. It's very much how I operate, and I do very frequently look at my goals and kind of reevaluate whether I bit off more than I can chew, or what I really, really need to focus on, and kind of refocus and re-clarify what those priorities are throughout the year or at different parts of the year. Maybe I can focus on different things, and that's okay. So I won't be holding myself to sticking to this, or there's some sort of punishment. That's just not how I'm going to operate with these goals. But I hope this was somewhat interesting, or kind of shows how I think about my bookish goals, and I hope some of them will be interesting enough that you want to continue on with this journey with me to see if I actually can accomplish some of these next year. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any bookish goals next year. I would love to hear. I love hearing people's bookish goals, or maybe those aren't something that you typically set, and that's great. But if you have some you would love to share, I would love to hear. And I will link my Instagram down below as well. I'm hoping to be more active on Bookstagram. I'm probably not even going to bother with Twitter for the foreseeable future. Maybe a permanent decision, we'll see. But I am going to be trying to focus on Bookstagram. So I will link that below, as well as more information about how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement. And I will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.